Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari from the state of Arizona has been leading the charge when it comes to accountability from DHS and ICE. She's a co-sponsor on articles of impeachment for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. She's also introducing legislation called ICE Slush Fund Elimination Act. I mean, considering the amount of money, billions of dollars that have been earmarked to go to support ICE, she's also saying, look, when it comes to a budget showdown at the end of this month, funding ICE is going to be a deal breaker, a non-starter. I invited her to the Katie Phang News Channel to sit down to talk about all these issues, including a bipartisan resolution concerning what's happening in Iran. Take a listen. And joining me now is Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari. She represents Arizona's 3rd Congressional District. And for those that don't know, Congresswoman, you are the youngest woman currently serving in the 119th Congress, for which I am incredibly proud. I pointed you out to my daughter, my 11-year-old daughter the other day, because she has some pretty big aspirations. I'm also proud to say that I am a daughter of immigrants, as you are. You are the first Iranian American Democrat to be serving in Congress, and you're also the freshman class president. So it sounds like overachieving is kind of part of the genetics for you, and we'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about something that's happening in real time right now that affects all Americans. And that's one, the fact that we have an upcoming, I think, another potential government shutdown at the end of the month, January 30th. And part of that may be tied to the funding for DHS and ICE. You were very strong about this yesterday. You had a few words to share. We're going to play it right now and ask you a question on the other side, okay?
Should ICE funding be a red line issue for Democrats in the appropriations process and any minibuses or anything like that to come?
Absolutely. I think ICE is completely out of control, and there should be no more funding given to ICE. The funding that already has been given to them through the big ugly bill should be stripped entirely, because they have no guardrails, no accountability whatsoever, and they're terrorizing people across this country.
Like I said, you are unequivocal about it. Are you ready to stand alongside other Democrats, especially in the House, to say, there's no deal here if we continue to fund what's happening in terms of terrorizing our American people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt this way for a long time. I think the recent murder of Renee Nicole Good was, the absolute worst that could have happened, but it frankly wasn't surprising that it did happen. ICE has been terrorizing communities across this country since the beginning of the second Trump administration in a way that Americans have never seen before. They don't care what your immigration status is. They will go after you. They racially profile every single day. I have seen firsthand the way ICE treats people inside detention centers in this country. I've gone to the one in Arizona several times. I've spoken with dozens of detainees there, and they describe nothing short of torture, whether it's psychological torture, whether it's being denied food and water and medical access. I have a constituent in Eloy, it's the detention center in Arizona, who has cancer, who has been there for more than 11 months now. She's dying. The last time I went, I saw her vomit blood, and it has been the most difficult process just to force these people to let her see an oncologist and now to try to get a treatment plan. And so, I think there are countless egregious reasons why ICE needs to be stripped of its funding. In the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump signed into law last year, what he did with that and what Republicans did with that is they took away people's health care, they took away people's food assistance, and they handed it to ICE. And they are hiring people in the thousands without even doing basic background checks. There are more criminals in ICE than the people they are actually detaining. The vast majority of people being detained by ICE have no criminal record whatsoever. So I'm actually introducing a bill to this effect. It's called the ICE Slush Fund Elimination Act. We're calling on Democrats to co-sponsor. It essentially strips the $170 billion that was in the big, beautiful bill for ICE. This is just the beginning. I mean, there's the issues around ICE are rampant. And we know how this administration feels about ICE. We know how Stephen Miller in particular is the architect behind how they operate. But we need to stand up for this right now before more people get hurt.
I think it's really important to remind everybody who's tuning in right now, Congresswoman, you call it, Trump and the Republicans called it the big, beautiful bill. I have been calling it the big bullshit bill for a long
I like
time.
that
I want to
word.
attribute that to you.
Yeah.
Listen, it's what it is. And then the big bullshit bill, I want to remind people, $170 billion, that's with a B, dollars over 4 years for border and interior enforcement, more than the yearly budget for all local and state law enforcement agencies across our United States combined. And the largest share of that 170 billion has been directed to go to benefit ICE for the purposes of arresting, detaining, and deporting immigrants, as well as money to recruit as many as 10,000 new officers. You briefly mentioned, and I want to get into it a little bit because you represent Arizona's third. And Arizona, like Florida, where I am, I mean, we have a hold my beer moment with alligator Alcatraz, don't we? But you have really been digging in to get answers from Kristi Noem at DHS about these detention facilities. You mentioned Eloy, where you have several constituents that have been illegally and unconstitutionally detained. But talk about the fact that they want to build these big deportation facilities, one of whom they're interested in building in Glendale for the intention of incarcerating more than 80,000 migrants.
Yes. So part of that $170 billion is $40 billion to expand detention center capacity across the country. So currently, the detention centers that exist, including Eloy, including the ones in other states, there's technically capacity for 40,000 some people. However, they have been overfilling these detention centers. They've been housing some 65,000 people, which also adds to the inhumanity of it all. But with the money, their goal is to quadruple this capacity across the country. It's very important to continue to call out who really is benefiting. And part of this is just corruption. It's a disgusting, racist policy around mass deportation, but it's also to make certain people and companies more money. CoreCivic and Geo Group are the two private prison companies making billions of dollars off of this, right? So they are the ones that are going to build more detention center capacities. They are going to be involved in these warehouses. We've been trying to get more information from DHS about this Washington Post report that did cite the fact that they're looking at Glendale. Reached out to the mayor of Glendale. He's heard nothing about this. We are getting zero responses from Kristi Noem or her staff. Her staff will not even acknowledge receipt of an email from our offices. That's how they treat Democratic members. And this is not normal. I have many staffers who work in my office who've been on the Hill for years. When they were in the administration and Republican members of Congress reached out to them with inquiries, they responded immediately. That's your job. You actually have to be accountable to Congress. But that just as a side, so people know the context that we're dealing with this administration, they don't feel like they need to be accountable or respond to Democrats in any way, shape, or form. So we're trying to get more information about the warehouses. But again, the funding is there. That's why we have to strip the funding. That's why we have to be much more explicit as Democrats about this. And the public is on our side. This is no longer an issue that is extreme or that, is considered radical in any way, shape, or form. The vast majority of Americans, poll after poll shows that Donald Trump is underwater on immigration, that people think ICE is too forceful, that even the term abolish ICE has more popularity than it ever has before because they just murdered someone and because people see the videos day after day of assaults on American citizens, of American citizens being detained, of green card holders being taken. A DACA recipient in my district was detained on Christmas Eve while she was Christmas shopping for her family. A DACA recipient. Why? Why is ICE using resources in this way? So it's simply gone too far. And I think that the everyday American knows that and sees that. And we as members of Congress need to fight for that.
Well, they're doing it because they have that slush fund. And that's the reason why you're introducing that legislation.
And no accountability to that.
The worst of us would do that, right? If you had limitless funds and no accountability, you had no one to whom you need to answer, including the American public, you would do it, which kind of, when we talk about these detention facilities, it also reminds me of Tom Homan, who continues to refuse to answer questions about the $50,000 he got in that kava bag that was going towards him to be able to benefit, right? Even though it was undercover, he's known for being able to benefit vendors, all of these bullshit vendors that are coming over and getting these sweetheart deals. Everybody's profiting paying off the grift. And the people that are being hurt are obviously the detainees, the immigrants, and frankly, the American sense of security, which is part of the reason why you have now announced that you are going to co-sponsor legislation that's introduced to impeachment, resolutions concerning DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Congresswoman Robin Kelly from Illinois is seeking to impeach Secretary Noem on 3 counts: obstruction of Congress, violation of public trust, like you and I just talked about, and self-dealing, citing alleged misconduct in her oversight of federal operations and the use of public resources. We have not missed the photo ops. We have not missed the dumb hats.
Yeah.
We have not missed the face makeup and the hair, the blowouts. I mean, it's pretty disgusting that we have people that can't have health care and basic necessities to live. But we're able to see her run around the country in her private jets trying to pull this off.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And I think, she's entirely in it for the grift. There are some people who are true believers in this administration who are extremely, calculated, no moral compass whatsoever. I would put Stephen Miller in that category.
Absolutely.
That I think, not that I think Kristi Noem is a good person in any way, shape, or form, but I also think for her, this is about the grift. For her, this is about being in the spotlight, being in the mix, and she doesn't care. She'll do whatever it takes to do that. And I think she does need to be impeached. I think the way she handled the response of Renee Nicole Good's murder was absolutely disgusting. The fact that they used official accounts to immediately go ahead and call this woman a domestic terrorist and outright lie about what happened is in and of itself an impeachable offense. And then she went and, I saw her on the Sunday shows this weekend and completely defending that and defending what the president said, which the president also outright lying, as he does, about the video that the American public saw. And that to me, these are tenets of an authoritarian regime. And that's why many of us have been saying this is an authoritarian style government, because, it's the propaganda that they put forward every single day in terms of gaslighting and lying to the American people is no different than what you see in those authoritarian style government run countries.
So I wanted to read off this quote from you about this Noem impeachment move. You said exactly what you just said now, quote, "This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is what happens when a president turns a federal agency into his personal paramilitary force deployed against the civilian population of the United States." It kind of reminds me of something you just did yesterday, which was sponsor this bipartisan resolution in Congress concerning what's happening in Iran. I feel what's happening, and listen, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you are the first Iranian American Democrat to serve in Congress, and I know that you are the proud daughter of Iranian immigrants. And I feel like, yes, we are understandably focused on a lot that's happening in our backyards, but there's a lot of stuff that's happening in Iran that's not going noticed. The latest numbers is as many as 3,000 feared dead, as many as 18,000 detained. The government is now firing on unarmed protesters. Kind of sounds like what we have going on here in the United States. Let me be blunt. But talk about this bipartisan resolution. One, I was thrilled that it was bipartisan. And two, why it meant so much for you as an Iranian American to be able to bring this resolution.
Yeah, it's been a really tough time. Iranians have been held hostage by this theocratic authoritarian regime for about 47 years now. My parents fled Iran during and after the revolution, when things really took a turn in the country. Rights were stripped away. My grandfather was imprisoned, et cetera, et cetera. And this latest round of protests are the largest that the country has seen in a long time, probably since the Women Life Freedom Movement in 2022, but it's continued to sustain. It's different this time because it also included the bazaris and the merchants. So economic factors are at play, but the chants of the people are very clear. They're demanding an end to the Islamic Republic regime, which really has imprisoned, tortured, murdered tens of thousands. I mean, there are tens of thousands of people right now in a place called Evin prison, which is like the notorious prison inside Iran, where some of the brightest minds of the country and dissidents in the country are. Iranians have felt for a long time that they are abandoned by the world. Obviously, Iran has been isolated by the world,
Yeah.
rightfully because of the regime. The people in the country are obviously largely against their regime, but they're also very pro-West, and it's an educated population. They don't want to be abandoned, and they are asking for help. And now, what does that help look like is always very difficult. These come to foreign policy questions, and I am the first to say I do not trust Donald Trump in anything, let alone caring about, and he doesn't care about American people. I don't think that he cares about Iranian people, despite the statements that he makes. But the purpose of the resolution was to show a united front from the United States Congress that we stand with Iranian people protesting for their freedom, really presses on internet freedom, because that has been one of the biggest issues, is that the regime has actually completely cut off the internet. They cut it off for 5 days straight. So people could not get in touch with their families. More recent videos were not coming out. And so they were able to commit these atrocities in the dark. And I heard your numbers. It's unclear. I've heard numbers as high as 20,000 murders.
Oh my God.
People just started getting in touch with their family members yesterday. And all the descriptions have said that it's like a bloodbath outside, and it's just everywhere on the streets. It's bloody with the amount of people that were murdered.
Well, look, you are standing up and speaking out, and you're kind of one of the few, even though this is a bipartisan move, focusing and bringing attention to this, because again, we have to, I like to say, walk and chew gum, right? We have to always call it out for what's happening, especially internationally, because I think our international kind of presence has been so deteriorated, and our integrity has been destroyed because of this president, that I think people look at us and they're like, what are you going to do? Is this a moment where you step in and do the right thing? And Venezuela being a shitty example, I think of that. One thing I want to talk about is this, because I do know you spend a lot of time focusing on and really taking care of your constituents in Arizona. I noticed that Republicans in Arizona are trying to criminalize protesters for, quote, obstructing an arrest. They're literally trying to augment the legal definition of what it means to obstruct a federal agent.
Yeah.
And this is all being led by Arizona Republicans, one of whom I wanted to highlight is a guy named John Gillette. He's a state rep, right? He's a Republican in Arizona.
We have a lot of kooky state reps.
No, but this dude was especially bad. He apparently resigned after amassing 42 complaints in a 13-year career, a number of which were for excessive force, with multiple lawsuits stemming from his treatment of suspect and victims. Stated last year that Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal should be executed for encouraging protests, and called American Muslims, quote, fucking savages who should be deported to the, quote, shithole places they come from. I mean, this guy, the fact that he serves in a legislative position is galling to me. But the reason why I bring it up is, number one, because I want people to know who this guy is, because I think it's horrible. But number two, before you went to Congress, you were the vice mayor of Phoenix and the youngest woman ever elected to the Phoenix City Council. I spend a lot of time here on my channel talking about local and state races, because I truly believe that for a lot of us, some of the most impactful moments and differences we can make are the ones that are in our backyard.
100%.
That we can entrust people like you to go to DC and speak up and speak out and help us. But we really need to be spending some time lifting up and putting candidates into office locally and on the state level, because so much is now being kicked back to the states for us to manage. Your thoughts about your own personal trajectory, kind of local, state, that type of energy, but like why it is important for us to kind of be paying attention to both of those spaces.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. You know, I was motivated to run for office after that 2018 wave, the first kind of post-Trump wave, young, diverse, progressive women who ran for office, not just for Congress, but up and down the ballot.
Yeah.
And I was working on climate policy at the time. And so what really riled me up was when Trump first pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and which is something I had worked on, and then, enacting the travel ban, et cetera. But there's just so much you can do at the local level on climate policy, on electrification, clean energy. And so that's when I really, as I was having an existential crisis during Trump 1.0, I thought I can probably make a much bigger impact on what's happening in this country by shifting my focus, which is I was working at the UN, to much more local. And so I actually decided to move back home to Arizona, which is where I'm from and where I'd grown up. I moved back home in 2018, started getting very involved, ran for city council. And I like stand by this 1,000%. The things that I was able to do on the city council, we have our first electric buses on Phoenix streets because of a transportation plan that I was able to pass. We started the country's first Office of Heat Response and Mitigation to actually be able to, combat the biggest climate threat that we deal with on the ground. We brought new parks to people's neighborhoods. Like, local government is also where you rebuild trust between the public that their government can actually work for them, because you can really do things it's still slow, but a little bit faster than other forms of government. And it made all the difference. I mean, I was lucky in that I served during the Biden presidency. And so the COVID relief funding, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, Inflation Reduction Act, I got to see like that money come to Phoenix. But then with the right people in office, we can really like build, a progressive, sustainable city that works for people. We did so much on housing affordability, built 1,000 new shelter beds for folks. So when I talk to young people or anyone who wants to run for office, like, I highly recommend city level government. State is good too. I think state's great. But state is a little bit more similar to Congress, right? It does get more hyper partisan. Arizona, we're stuck in this, like, we're a few seats short. But on a city council, you really can work in a bipartisan way, and you just talk about things a little bit differently. And I don't know, I think you can really help people.
But what I love about that, because the takeaway for me is you believed in and were passionate about climate issues. And and that's what I'm trying to tell people. It doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to be some one huge mixed bag for you to be motivated and inspired to go and do this and to serve.
Yeah.
It can just be one issue that you care so much about that you want to make sure is not left behind in that big bag of mixed issues. And that's why you run. I mean, that's exactly why I wanted to ask you, because it's definitely something that I harp on. I believe that that's the real next wave, right? I mean, I believe in us taking over the House in 2026, but I also think that some of the most significant impacts we're going to make is locally. And so I always invite people to speak about their experiences, because I think it actually informs the way that you are in Congress as well. That your experience on that level makes a big difference the way you interact with constituents. I am thrilled that we were able to spend this time together. Thank you so much for being such a fighter.
Thank you.
I know you've got, like I said, I know you've got another big battle coming up in a couple of weeks on this budget issue. So we're hoping that everything turns out okay, because I mean, the last shutdown was 43 days?
Yeah.
And that one was kind of tied to this issue of the ACA subsidies. And now that may or may not get through the Senate. Your thoughts very quickly about what you think about that?
ACA?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of them reaching the threshold that they need in the Senate. But I hope that, being in this role, you have to have this little bit of optimism that sometimes isn't maybe like backed up by full facts and data, but I'm trying to remain optimistic. There have been unexpected things that have happened, in the last couple of months that we couldn't have imagined in our wildest dreams, such as on Epstein, on certain members of the Republican Party coming out. So I really, for the sake of the American people who rely on these subsidies, I really hope that the Senate's able to figure something out.
Me too. But in the meantime, Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari, thank you so much again for being the fighter that you are. And thanks for spending time with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.